Good morning. Let me wipe this camera for you because I think I got you looking at me foggy. This phone fell down. Much better, right? We're so much clearer. This phone fell down a flight or two of stairs in the Capitol the other day, and it survived, and it is here with us just like you survived yesterday, and you are here with us. Big morning, guys. It's a big morning. It's Jackie Glass, Mama, Navy vet, certified doer, and the 89th District delegate for the House of Delegates. Why that is so, never gets old. Never gets old. It's me. I'm your laced up legislator, and we've got our sneakers on today, getting ready to move. I do have committee this morning. Fortunately, committee got pushed to 7:30, so we've got a little bit of time. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. The committee I have this morning is the House Privileges and Elections Subcommittee, and guys, today's going to be another one of those days because what's happened is like a couple of weeks ago when we talked about, you remember when we were talking about how good morning to you. Remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about how there were some constitutional amendments and for people to get their right to vote as soon as they're released from prison, and also repealing the same-sex ban that's still in the Virginia Constitution. And I know you're thinking like, hey, on the federal level, we've already addressed that problem where our Constitution is still stuck back in 2000 late, and we haven't updated it. And so all we're trying to do is get those two things, that qualified voters should be able to vote, and that we should fix the language in our Constitution to match 2022. It's going to be a really difficult one. Last time we saw this come in front of the committee, we had people comparing same-sex marriage to bestiality and to polygamy and to, I want to say it's shocking, but I'm not necessarily shocked by it when people do these things, but it is. So what's happening is we heard it on the House side. So a delegate brought the bill, Delegate Sickles actually, who is like a cartoon character. And I've said that to him. He is definitely like a cartoon character with his humor. But Delegate Sickles brought the bill to us, right? And so we had crossover. And so in the House, someone in the House also brought the bill through the House. So this bill was coming at two angles. So one side from the House, another side from the Senate. And since our bills have since crossed over, this one didn't make it in the House, so it's dead. And so we're going to hear the Senate version of it. To my knowledge too, but this is what we've always done. Conrad said that to his knowledge, you're the only legislator who does this, but it's, we've always done this, and we just want to keep doing it, to be quite honest, because my time, unfortunately, when I leave, this is when I leave and get to work, oftentimes it's go, and I don't have any other time or I could make time, but you wouldn't get the freshness the first thing in the morning, ready to go. So we're doing this first thing in the morning, okay? So that's what I have in committee today, and committee is at 7:30. So I'm gonna stand by. I'm getting myself emotionally ready because when I hear people speak with a complete disregard for other people's lived experience, it's really hard. Empathy is a muscle, and it has to be worked. And I find that there are oftentimes people that are coming to testify and coming to say, look, prisoners don't deserve to have their right to vote. People shouldn't be able to marry whoever they want to, because they don't have empathy, and they're only seeing the world in their one view. And we see that across the board. We see that sometimes with legislation. And what I'm going to do there's a good segue into that, to the equity removal that the governor is doing right now. I want to talk about that, but I want to backtrack first I had some notes, to a couple bills that did not do well, that'll affect us, and that did do well, that are going to affect us. So I have two that I think are really important for y'all to know, like right now. So first one is the fact that it passed in the Senate the Senate killed a bill that would allow police to do pretext stops. So if you're not familiar with pretextual stops, it's like, oh, you had something dangling from your rearview mirror, I'm gonna pull you over. Oh, you had one tail light out, yeah, I'm gonna pull you over. Or like that's some real stuff. And so disproportionately we've seen that non-white people, specifically black folks, are pulled over for these things, and the outcomes are a matter of life and death. And so what we're saying is you've got to have a primary moving violation, and this was changed, I think, in 2020. You have to have a moving violation in order to stop and then give a ticket because your tints are too dark or because you have something dangling in your mirror. Now, there's two sides to every story, right? So what we heard from like the sheriffs is like the highway patrol is like, look, if you're not stopping people to tell them they got a headlight out, that's a safety hazard, which I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Like that is not a safety hazard. However, however, like what I'd like to know is before I said, yeah, I want to make sure that there is a safety, that the safety issue is addressed, as I would start looking at traffic data that was a contributing factor. If we're not seeing an increase of traffic accidents for that being a contributing factor, then it's a non-point. It's moot. Like it doesn't. But if that is the case, then we have to address. We should also have a non-punitive way to address people getting their headlights fixed. Let me just tell you, at the age of 16, part of why I have such, I want to hold the community and our policing in our hands is because my experiences with the police were terrible. My birthday, the day I got my license, I remember having my balloons in the back seat of my car, driving from school. It was the first day I was driving from school, and I got pulled over. The police officer says, you're driving erratically. I had just turned a corner. Mind you, my heart is like, because I'm trying to make it. I'm just going to get home. Like, I wasn't driving crazy. If I was, I promise you, I would tell you I was. I just turned a corner in a place that is known for doing these things. And I said erratically. I didn't even know what erratically mean, y'all. So I had to go look that up. I was not driving erratically, but he took my license. I'm like, I know he gonna see on there that I just turned 16, like today's my birthday and whatever. He couldn't find anything to give me a ticket for. He saw that my father's car that I was driving had a fraternal order of police, and he's like, is your dad police? Like, questioning me about. I said, this car doesn't belong to me, it's my father's. And he scraped my father's sticker off of his car. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he really wanted to have a reason to ticket me. And I was, again, in a neighborhood where I know that people like me are known to be stopped, so you like drive extra careful just so you don't get pulled over. So it's real. And Conrad said, to your point, 31% of pullovers are black, 18% of Virginians are black. Police stops are practiced racially police stops are by practice racially biased until these new laws. Yes. So we're just trying to protect the neck, and I agree with you. So that legislation died in the Senate. Okay, so the Senate killed that stuff. However, right? Actually, I don't want to say died. It's just by the nature of the things that we do here, things are partisan, and some things are not partisan. So I'm going to speak on an issue that may seem partisan, but for real, this is about leadership. So the House Republican Party, or GOP, blocked the bill to sort of allow for marijuana sales to sort of start, right? Here's what we know, right? A year ago or some time ago, we legalized marijuana for recreational use. However, there wasn't necessarily a comprehensive plan to how we were going to sell. We were really talking about this equity word. Like, if we do this, we need to make sure that those disproportionately affected by marijuana and the criminalization of it have skin in the game. And so this bill died in subcommittee, a 5-3 vote, party line. And I'm making sure that I'm reading it right so that I give you guys the lowdown. when all all they had to do was, they didn't have to, there didn't need to be a new bill. They just had to reenact the clause that the General Assembly had. Reenact means just like, okay, we're going to go ahead and carry this over until we come up with a good plan. Like until we can come and decide how we want to regulate and how we want to yeah, how again but so also understand some people are in the business of regulation and monitoring, all that good stuff. Like that's not wrong, right? Leadership wise, you want to know how we going to do it, what is going to be our tax status, like how we're going to do this business. So all they had to do was sort of reenact what was already there, and we could have moved forward, and then we could have come back next year and try to do something better. Like I'm trying to give it to you guys as simple as possible. But here's what happened: there was no reenactment. The bill to start sales died in the House, and there's finger pointing, right? The Dems are like, hey, y'all could have just reenacted. They're like, no, because y'all should have set it up and done it all right the first time, right? Like, here's the deal, is there's a leadership breakdown here. If you are in charge, right? If you and I are in charge, then we do the things necessary to make sure that there's no black market, right? Like this is more so, if it's a tit for tat, then it's a tit for tat, but it's also a failure in leadership to say that we don't want to create a problem. We want to make sure that we can sustain what we have until we find a good solution, rather than just saying, like my toys, I'm about to throw stuff, this, and it's your fault I had to do this. Like it's just that's kind of tough to sit with. So be on the lookout. Once I get more information about what's going to happen with the marijuana retail sales, and Virginia Pilot did a good article on it, just sort of comprehensively talking about it. So if that's your stick, you definitely need to make sure that we're staying abreast on what's happening with that. So those two, marijuana retail sales, pretext stops, traffic stops, those are two things that I thought were hot items. And the constitutional amendments that I talked about, that I'm going to be going to committee in about 45 minutes to talk about. All right, I'm looking in the comments. Yeah, okay, by the way, why is it tough to do? Agree to sell and regulate something. I don't know that it's hard to do. Conrad asks but why is that tough to do? Agree to sell and regulate something. It could be a number of things. At least from my purview, I try to see things from each side. It could have been a political play to say, y'all, we're not gonna legalize it, or say we're not gonna approve retail sales. We're gonna tell people you can have it recreationally, but where you gonna buy it from? We can do that, and then we can blame the Dems, right? Like we can say it's their fault because when they executed, they should have had that. It could also be like, yo, we want to make sure that we get this right. Like we want to make sure that that when we decide to sell, that we don't create a bigger problem than we don't want to create a problem, that we create a market that works. However, we are working with a subset of people, and we've heard it from specifically from the governor recently, is that they want to remove equity out of everything. So to me, it's twofold. We're holding it up because we're making sure that there's no equity, but more than just lots of people are going to be affected by it. But that's opinion. That's not educational based. But I'm trying as a leader, right? Like I'm a student leader here in the General Assembly. I'm learning, but you guys also sent me here to make decisions and do things. Like this is why this is our republic piece of our constitutional democratic republic. I inherently have to make some decisions that holding in our hands what's good for us, right? And make decisions. So I think it's sort of a failure of foresight and planning when you're at the helm, right? You sort of have to know these things are coming. So maybe the failure wasn't a failure. Maybe this is considered a success for them because they can say, hey, the Democrats did you a disservice by not doing X, Y, and Z. So I don't know, Conrad. Okay, so the equity piece. Now, I've been having some really hard conversations about Executive Order number 1. And for those of you guys that don't know, and I'm actually pulling it up, on day one, our governor put out 11, I think, executive orders. Right? Anybody see those executive orders? Did anybody get a chance to look at them? It's important. So understand that executive orders are not legislation. They're not legislation, right? They're just the governor saying, I'm charging, how do I want to put it? It's just, okay, saying like, okay, this is a rule, or this is something I want, this is what I want to happen, right? That's the president or whoever the leader of the executive branch saying, here's what I want to happen. However, that doesn't create funding for it. It doesn't turn it into law. That still takes the legislative branch, which is understanding, right? The executive plan is going to tell you, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And then the legislative branch says, this is how we make it happen. So however, what's important to know is that as our executor or our governor can charge his cabinet with doing whatever. So executive order number 1 has a lot to do with education and equity and the removal of that. So it talks about no political indoctrination in classrooms, and we've talked about this, y'all. I'm saying this because on Friday, he had the superintendent of learning instruction put out this order saying we're going to remove all this stuff. Like, this stuff is inherently divisive. So divisive concepts, it's a lot. Here is the problem. Right? Here is, as I sat and broke down, I had a conversation with one of my trusted agents about executive order number 1. I'm just talking about order number 1 because it's like, we're going to move away. We're going to get rid of cultural, uh-oh. Y'all know when you get emails and uh-oh. All right, so hold on, I want to pull it up so that I'm speaking directly from it, because I'm always going to try to make it so that we are speaking from a place of truth. So executive order 1, the promise to restore excellence in education by removing the use of divisive concepts, including critical race theory and public education. It's a wedge issue, y'all, right? It's a wedge issue where, like, my staff, we were talking about this yesterday, explained to me, is that you pick something that people are going to jump on one side of the fence or the other, and you're hoping that they're going to jump on your side of the fence. And so contextually, I don't know, and you guys can levy with me, I don't know how well it was thought through. And as I think about it more deeply, I find more issues with it. It says we must learn it to enable our students to take risks, think differently, to imagine and see conversations regarding art, science, and history as a place where they have a voice. All right. Number 1, no political indoctrination. Do you know what our very first political indoctrination is that we all do as kids? Well, most of us did when we were in school. The number 1 thing that we did that was considered, that could be considered political indoctrination. Y'all know what it is? I want you to take a guess. What's one thing that we do? We still do it here, that it could be considered political indoctrination. I'm going to wait, because I know y'all going to, yeah. Boom. Carly. Boom. Yes. Pledge of Allegiance. Right? Now roll the Pledge of Allegiance through your head. Roll it. Run that back. Yup, Joe. Run that back. National anthems, all of that. Right? Run it back. And so it says political indoctrination has no place in our classrooms. So essentially we should stop the pledge, right? Yup, the vast majority of learning in schools, and I'm reading for the executive order, the vast majority of learning in schools involves impartial critical knowledge and skills in math, science, history, teaching, and others that should be non-controversial. Okay, let's underline the word non-controversial. Now, again, why I'm going into this is because on Friday, the superintendent of learning instruction did an audit to strip all these things that had the word equity in it from any learning materials, any resources, or anything. And I'll try to make sure that that gets put in the comments. But the word is any non-controversial. You know what's controversial? You want to know what's the most controversial thing we probably teach in schools? What do you think? What's the most controversial class that you have? Really, that starts at a very young age. Look, I put my teacher face on. What is the most controversial thing? Let me just tell you. History. History is the most controversial thing that we teach because history belongs to who? Social studies. That's right. Boom, boom, boom. It's the most it's inherently controversial. Yes, social studies history, because there's no way to teach history without being non-divisive. You kind of have to pick the story that you're going to tell. And so when I'm looking at the executive order again with my peer group, and I'm saying, wow, they have rallied all these parents around ending inherently decisive concepts in education, and are essentially getting them to say, and they don't even know it. I don't think people recognize this. No pledge of allegiance, no history. We have to remove that from the classroom. Based on this executive order, these are things that we should be removing from the classroom because they are inherently controversial. We don't want to teach things. We want to teach things that should be non-controversial. So it says it denies our students the opportunity to gain important facts, core knowledge, formulate their own opinions, and think for themselves. Here's the kicker with that, right? Think for themselves. We want them to think for themselves. Wow. In, what is it, number 11? Where is it at? Where did we talk about this at? We want them to think for themselves. We want them to be able to sort of gain their own knowledge. While in paragraph 3, it says, right, we don't want any political leanings. We don't want none of that. And this is why it's important for us to really look at this stuff. We want to, they talked about the triumph of America's greatest generation against the Nazi empire. That's political. Like, that war was about different ideologies. We can't teach that because we want no political indoctrination. We don't want them believing in the American way is inherently political in its own way, right? Or it has values in its own way. So Soviet Union, the ills of communism, again, political indoctrination. If you're telling me to be against Nazism and you're telling me that we wanted you to learn about being against communism, you are now essentially indoctrinating me, doing political indoctrination, which in paragraph 2, under the importance of the initiative says political indoctrination has no place in our classrooms. We have to think this through. And so as we take this journey, because I don't think that'll and I don't want to, I'm not going to dig too much deeper into this, but I've got my own thoughts and feelings about this because I sat in a room with our governor and I cried, and I'm just going to tell y'all, I was moved to tears when he came and talked to the Black Legislative Caucus, the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. I cried because I got upset. And let me just be clear. It wasn't like I was sad or anything, because I don't think I'm ever really surprised by people's positions on things. I recognize there's all kinds of people in this world. But what I saw was someone saying that we need a meritocracy, and that's what came out the mouth. And when I hear meritocracy, I feel that for not just our children, because we're talking about it in classrooms. I feel that for us as a people, because what I know is that the only place that a meritocracy works is probably in professional sports, where on the fly the ref can't move the rim, he can't change. And I think we've talked about this before. How do we have a meritocracy when barriers exist? What we're saying is that there's no barriers for there are no barriers for Americans. I think about the rural kids too. Like, just as I think about our young people in the city of Norfolk, I think about the kids in the rural area whose parents may be riled up about this, but they're saying, "Lo, if you can't make the grades, then you can't be a part." And we're not going to talk about equity. So it doesn't matter that you had to work 2 jobs, that that you got your B's and your C's or whatever. All of that doesn't matter, because this is a meritocracy. And if a meritocracy truly worked, then we wouldn't have had the college scandal where the kids with all the resources were paying to get in schools and taking places and spaces. We really have to severely think about what's happening here. This is something that could affect If we really thought about it, and I'm hanging on to this because it's hurtful. It's hurtful and it's harmful. Is that if we really think about advocating for education without context, because that's said in there. How do you teach without context? If we think about a meritocracy, then we wouldn't have Title I, where, you know, women's sports that don't make money are essentially funded by those who do. There are football programs that are funding all the rest of the other sports teams, right? At many colleges, many schools. So we're saying, well, if women basketball can't cut it, y'all can't make the money, then sorry for ya. We just gonna have basketball and men's basketball and men's football. That's it. So like, there are these things in place to ensure that we're all able to contribute and to have a society that works for us all. We cannot continue to look at legislating in a way where we're not considering that historically there has been a deprivation of resources and space and in places that have had communities, not just Black folks, that there have been, this is a money thing too. Essentially, it's a money thing, and then we break it down to race, that we've had communities that have been without resources and not able to ascend, or doing more with less. We do need to create opportunities, and when we single mind our focus and say, well, we're only focusing on the grades, then, you know, like, or we're only focusing on what you bring to the table, that is one of the most privileged things that you can say. Because we are not linear as a people. So I guess what I wanted to stress in this little bit of time is that we have to pay attention in a meaningful way to what matters to us. And this particular executive order number 1, I've been sitting with it in my chest for my children, for my little citizens on my block, for pretty much kids across the Commonwealth. Like, sorry, it's inconsiderate and it's a disservice to not look at the whole picture of why we are the way we are, and then not do the work to correct it. And that is where equity comes in. It ain't a bad word. So again, I'm going to encourage you guys to take a look at the laundry list of things that our superintendent of learning instructions decided is divisive. All of it has to do with equity. The majority of it has to do with equity. All of it's going to be pretty much removed, or said that we can't teach cultural differences in our classrooms, and that is a disservice. So Conrad, you said meritocracy is based on structures of society that are biased. Yeah, it inherently is biased, creating imbalance of what is perceived to be the best and the brightest. Absolutely. You know what I think about when I think about when I think about us narrowing intelligence down to the haves, or, you know, to a merit, like, is that I think about somebody like Kevin Hart, right, who is a comedian, and you wouldn't necessarily say, oh my God, he's so smart. Like, if he wasn't as successful, he wouldn't. But the ability the timing in comedy, the ability to elicit a response from people, the ability to read a room and be able to that's intelligence. And so there's so many different forms of intelligence that we have to celebrate and to provide a way forward, right? To honor, acknowledge, and provide a pathway to success. It's not just about grades. Something that was said was like, well, kids need to have the right grades to get into the governor schools, right? They got to have the right grades. And I said, wow. And in talking to our governor school folks, they were like, you know, what we think about, and this is our governor school here, the one we have in Norfolk, is what we think about is sometimes there's a kid who has been drumming in church his whole life, right? His or her whole life, drumming or singing in church, that didn't necessarily have a home structure that provided lessons, that allowed them to travel and do shows and things like that. But they are skilled, and with the right tools, bringing the right resources to them, you can create something great, something that's already great, enhance it. And maybe they don't have the grades to do so, but we're looking at the whole person. We're looking not just at potential, but ensuring that there's an opportunity to reach potential and beyond. And they're saying, let's get away with that. If he ain't got A's and B's, if they're not getting straight A's, then no, we didn't consider the fact that that kid is doing, I don't like to poverty porn things and say that all low-income people have it hard or anything, but there are things that my kids don't have access to, and I consider myself privileged. I just can't afford to do it. I can't afford to do the things that I wanted to do. Or I'm working so much that I don't have the bandwidth to get them to those places, or the network to get them to those places. So we have people that really want to bring our youth in, that really want to do great. And these sorts of things, y'all, is what we kind of have to pay attention to over the next coming years, because anybody that is willing to sacrifice or compromise or disregard equity, and say, we're just going to talk about, we're just going to talk about merits and opportunity, I am sure that it will matriculate into other things outside of school instruction. It's a way. So here's what I'm going to encourage you to do, because I know I went over time, and I appreciate, yes, I love the governor's school too. That I love them. I love our community, right? I say that this work that we're doing, and you guys getting up or 6 in the morning or whenever you watching this is our love story. This is our love story for the city of Norfolk. And so as we build this love story, I am learning here where I am at that there are things here that can compromise our ability to love deeply. And we show our love through policy. We show our love through investments. And here, that is being compromised. So there's a couple things that I think we need to look at. So I'm going to encourage you all to look at least executive. We're going to start with just executive order number 1. And I think I might do a series where I just educate on what the executive orders is. Maybe not so much my opinion, right? But this one does. It hits a nerve. It hits a nerve really hard. So executive order number 1, really take a look at it, because it is, it's telling, and it's a telling that it's number 1. Number 2, take a look at, and I'll put it in the notes, the report that was released by the superintendent of instruction saying that we're going to remove all of this, all of this needs to go. And then if there's something that you're really passionate about, like if you're like, hey, Jackie, is there any legislation happening or that has happened, drop, send a message to the Facebook, and then I can go and we can have the staff look and see if we'll come on Thursday morning or whatever, and make sure that we touch base and talk about, your form of legislation, or your love language, your policy love language, so that we can keep you abreast. So I'm going to go through the last little comments. So Southside STEM Academy is rated 8th lower. You are always advocating for them. Lower academically of 1,000+ schools. St. Helena is 5th. And from my office, so that's what we sort of, I'm about to hop off, but that's what we sort of talked about, is it's recognizing on this level, Barrett, on this level, the best thing that we can do is be a resource finder and provider. I will tell you that I've had conversation without giving too much up. We have a meeting. We're scheduling a meeting with, I think the principal is Miss Willie, about about aspects of STEM that have not necessarily been thought about, like aviation, thinking about how we can take some of these really great resources and build out programs that matter, that also give educators training as well, in the area of STEM. And I'm personally looking at like Denby High School and how they're actually building an aircraft. And folks in that community, there's so many opportunities, have been talking about how we haven't looked at aviation as a form of STEM, and it most certainly is. So stand by, because I had a meeting last week when we talked about possibly bringing an aviation career day to the STEM Academy, but that's all just talks, right? We haven't talked with the school, but we're finding resources and some free resources that'll give some interesting sort of STEM training to educators. So that has been at the heart of what I've been looking at is, are there any public-private partnerships that we can bring to the table? Because to be quite honest, our school systems don't have money like we want them to. Our local government, they don't have money like we want them to. Yes, there have been influx, but when we're talking about long-term, not one-time hit money, it ain't there. So it's going to have, we have to build these public-private partnerships that allow us to keep pushing forward. So who has skin in the game, right? I'm looking at the Centeras of the world. I'm looking at the Northrop Grummans of the world. I'm looking at all these different people that are, all these different organizations that are rooted in our community that could be good partners in building what it is that we're trying to see. And that's where it's at, because we can keep going to the school board, we can keep going to council, and they're working with what they have. So that's where my head is. That's from this office, is I am really considering and having our staff looking at what kind of public-private partnerships can we bring to the table to advance our communities and bring resources in. So that's what I got. I hope I'm saying this right. Tatanisha. I hope I said. Yeah. Okay. So I apologize, Ms. Brooks, if I didn't say your name correctly. She said, I was thinking about a community center that's VOTEC, but for the youth as well, so they can learn trades early in life. I went to a caucus. It was called the, goodness gracious, the VOTEC, the CT&E, couldn't even think about it, Career and Technical Education Caucus, and it was phenomenal, because guess what they were talking about? Free resources, right? Things that we can bring, and there are so many examples of how we could execute, how we could use libraries, and we were actually talking about I wasn't talking directly about the STEM Academy, but I was Southside, because right next to it we just had our newest library. And in the town of Reading, right? In the town of Reading, California, their library, which doesn't have a community center, so I guess I'm sort of talking adjacent to what you're saying about how do we bring it closer to. Their library got Boeing, I think, in partnership with the school system, the community, and Boeing brought flight simulators into the library. We're going to have a pilot shortage. We're going to have, my husband's a controller, air traffic controller. He getting old, y'all. And you can only control up until you're 57. So like thinking about industries where there's a great need and how we can build very early on. And no one disagrees that we have to start very early. Like we have to start in elementary school, latching them into the concepts of STEM and recognizing that it's not just that it can be simple math problems. It can be there are other ways to engage, and that's where I think we're going to learn. But I will leave you with this, because I done talked too much. I'm sure this office across the way, my staff is going to say that was too long. Here's what I'm going to say. This summer we will have policy work groups, right? We will have policy work groups. The most important thing that you can do is go to the website, Delegate Jackie Glass, and sign up to be a part of one of these policy work groups, because we need you. Human capital is only as good as you use it. I need help. I need help to prepare for the next session, because what I'm holding in my hands is what matters to both of us, right? Yeah, that what matters to both of us. So join a policy work group. When I get out of session, which is March 12th, once we're out of session, I know you are, it's March 12th, I will probably take a week, right? Take 1 week just to get my house in order, because y'all know how that is. I've been going away from home for 8 weeks, and I'm the stranger in the house. There's a stranger in my house, and that's me. So I'm going to take a week to get my affairs in order, and then that very next week, actually that same week, we have Engage Norfolk. I think I'm going to take that week, and then we'll start building out these policy groups. So if you've signed up for a policy work group and you're looking for what's next, it will be the top of May is when we'll start reaching out to folks. Yes, shout out the Green and Gold. Yes, thank you. Conrad for that. Maybe we need to give them a commending resolution for that accomplishment. Regular C. I got green on and gold. We'll take that. Let's do this. Congratulations to NSU. Thank you, Conrad. And if you know of any other sports teams in any school, like ASAP, email the office, like, or send a message via Facebook ASAP, because I have to have these resolutions in school. So if your kids' bowling team was number one, if you're the lacrosse, the basketball, if you guys feel like, you know, let's show them some recognition, because our job here is to do three things. Ready? Educate, advocate, and celebrate us. Okay? You guys make it a great day. I thank you for spending this time with us. Take care. Till Thursday.